Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey, everybody, my name is Amanda Brown. I'm a grateful alcoholic. By the grace of God, I'm sober today. I'm coming to you live from Montgomery, Alabama, in the middle of the state, where the heat today was probably 110. I thought I was just going to pure tea melt to death. My home group here in Montgomery is the Legacies group, where we try to practice all three sides of the triangle. We have one face-to-face meeting. The rest of our meetings are still on Zoom. And my sobriety date is May 19th, 1991. I'm very grateful to have 29 years sober. I know he's not on here, but I want to thank Stephen for asking me to speak this evening. This whole Zoom experience has been kind of wild. And I'm certainly grateful. I'm grateful that computers are small enough that they can now fit in our home. And I'm grateful that we have laptops, and I'm grateful for cell phones, and I'm grateful for whoever created that Zoom app. And when we get asked to speak, it's always interesting to me how those days are the days that I need to speak. The God of my experience has absolutely gone before, and he sees the whole train of my life, whereas I only see a few cars. So I'm very grateful to be able to be of service this evening and to share my story. There are people on here that I absolutely love and adore, and I'm so excited to see all of you. I always like to start with telling you a little bit about what's going on in my life right this minute. I will tell you right this minute, my daughter went to college. She's a freshman in college, and so she got there last week. And so that has been a new experience for me, her being 18 and at college. And then she went through Rush, and Friday, after having a wonderful week and all these different sororities saying they wanted her, Friday, the one that picked her, she was not really all about. So this weekend has been an emotional weekend. But I have been able to be a sweet, kind, and loving daughter. She let me go and take her to lunch. She let me take her shopping. So we're just walking this road together. My son is 16, and I think he just left the house and drove himself to soccer. I hope so. Although my daughter, they are doing all their classes virtual, except for chemistry lab, because you just can't put all that in a dorm room and do it from your dorm room. And then they're having to wear masks. And my son, his school is virtual. So he has been having school here in the house. But we're trying to let him have a little bit of outside. He is a wonderful soccer player, and so he's on a travel soccer team. This pandemic has certainly been an interesting experience. I will say it has been a lot of opportunities to practice this program in all my affairs. I have been with the same man for 28 years. What an order. I can't go through with it, right? We have been together since my very first year sober. He is an earth person. He's a normie. He never drank, doesn't drink. There's no alcohol in the house. And he works from home. Now, he works for the Department of Defense. He works for the military base here in Montgomery at Maxwell Gunner. But they shifted a lot of things right before the pandemic. He works for the Department of Defense in cybersecurity. And so he was working from home since last summer. Well, this last year was my daughter's senior year of high school. And then the corona hit. So we have been in this house pretty much since the end of February. That's a lot of opportunities to practice this program. Let me tell you, there are many days when it was really hard to be the only one in the house with a spiritual tool belt. There was no prom. We didn't get to have graduation until July. It's really been something. And then February 9th, my father died from liver cancer. He'd had it for about four years. He lives in Tampa, which is 8 hours one way from here. So when I got the call that it had metastasized and it was all over his body was in September, and I was on my way to a conference in Texas. So when I got back from that conference, from September till January, every week I would drive to Tampa and I would spend 4 or 5 days, and I would drive home on the weekends to be with my kids. And then in January, I just stayed there until he passed. So there's been a lot going on with me and in this house, with the corona, with my father passing, my first parent to pass. He was 67. And grief for this alcoholic is pretty extremely powerful. So I got asked to speak. I kept getting asked to speak, you know, even during the middle of the corona, you know, my conferences and stuff were getting canceled, but then everybody discovered Zoom. And the first time I spoke after my father passed was extremely hard for me. I did not realize how much a part of my story my real father is. I mean, from my very first memory. So normally when I would share what I was like and what happened and what I'm like now, what I was like didn't really change a whole lot. What happened is what happened. Now, what I'm like now and what my life is like now, that continues to evolve and change and grow the longer I stay sober. But I could not get through that, what I was like. So I began to ask the God of my experience to please help me and to help change my story. And so, you know, God, my God is such a kind and gentle God, and he's such a gentleman. And so after I had prayed that prayer, the next time I spoke, what came out was me doing my story through the 12 steps. And I have found that that's the way that God wants me to do it. Look, all I do is I pee and I pray, and I just try to open myself up and be a vessel for Spirit to just share whatever he would have me share, because I can't see all of you, but I'm so excited I can get to see some of you. I can't see all of you. I don't know who's in the audience. I don't know who's new. I don't know who's been here a while. After 29 years, that's a lot of life experiences. I've known happy. I've known sad. I've lost 2 sponsors and a mentor in sobriety. I've had to change home groups in sobriety. I've been married in sobriety. We've been married over 20 years. So they're having children. There's a lot of experiences in all of that. Experiences with my mother, with her marrying my bonus daddy, Chip. So I never know what God's going to pull out. So I just try to open that up and just let God pull out whatever, because he knows who's in here. So I'll start with the first step. Was my life powerless? Was I unmanageable? I took my first conscious drink of alcohol when I was 12 years old. We were down at the beach. My friend's dad took everybody's drink orders, and my best friend ordered a 6-pack of peach wine coolers. And I said, well, that sounds good to me. I think I'll have that too. So they came back, and I drank every single one of that 6-pack of peach wine coolers and proceeded to have the best night's sleep of my little life. And alcohol immediately did for me what I could not do for myself. I have been a blackout drinker from the get-go. I blacked out that night. Of course, I used to call it passing out. But, you know, I would lay there in bed at night, and because of things that had led up to that point, which we'll get to in the 4th step, you know, I would lay there in bed, and all the voices are just talking in my head, and what about this, and what about that, and what's going to happen to me, and oh my God, and all of it. And when I had that 6-pack of peach wine coolers, all of those voices shut up. Oh, it was wonderful. Now, I don't know if I became an alcoholic at that moment, but I will tell you, every moment after that, I was, how can I get it? Who's got it? How can I get more? How much money do I need to get it? Who can I steal it from? I started stealing it from my grandmother under her kitchen cabinet. I was a Bacardi 151 girl, and so I would get a Sprite bottle, and I'd pour the Sprite out, and I'd fill that bad boy up with Bacardi 151 rum, and we'd be sitting there at the dining table, and they think I'm having a Sprite, and I'm already trying one on. I only had friends that drank like me. I only went to friends' houses who I knew their parents had booze there, or they knew somebody older to get alcohol. And we lived out in the country, and there was field parties, and there was football parties, and just all of that went with it. And I graduated high school, and I went to a major college here in the state, and I played in the college band, and I had 415 brand new best friends. And we had the parties Thursday night after band practice, and we had the parties Friday night before the game, and we had the parties Saturday. I was either celebrating or commiserating. Either way, I was going to get drunk. Sunday, somebody was having a pro football party somewhere, and my disease progressed. You know, it talks about in the big book that many of us are gone beyond recall. This is especially true of women, and it was certainly true in my case. And a lot of things happened that first semester in college, and my mother told me I'd have to come home, and I said no, and stayed up there, and my disease progressed. And February 19th, 1991, my great-grandmother died, my big mama. Now, she was my great-grandmother on my mother's side, and she was the one somebody in my life that I felt like unconditionally loved me. It didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter if I made a bad grade in school. Big Mama was going to hug me, and she was going to love me, and she was going to tell me it was okay. And I remember getting the phone call that morning, and I was already drinking, and this was at the top of the state. And I had to get a girlfriend of mine to drive me all the way down south where I lived. I'm from a small town at the bottom of the state. And I remember telling her in that car ride home to Andalusia, you know what? I can still see that Baptist preacher up there slamming that Bible on that pulpit, telling me all the things that were sin, and that to even think them was the same kind of sin as doing them. And I knew the things I was doing were sinning, and I knew that I was going to hell. Let me see how fast I can get there. So the next 100 days I don't really have a cohesive picture of what the next 100 days were like. I lived in blackouts. The God of my experience has left me with 4 memories. One of my sponsors called them snapshots. And I'll share those 4 memories with you. And you know, but in the book, it talks about here are the methods we have tried. I did all of that. I switched from liquor to beer because beer was cheaper and beer got me drunk faster. I would go in a bar and take enough money just for one drink. And I would have that one drink, and I'd be like, well, what in the world is the point of that? And I'd start flirting with the guy next to me, and I've got my drinks bought the rest of the night. So the first snapshot I have is that I come to, and I'm in a concrete stairwell in some kind of building. And my head is hanging over this big square black industrial trash can, and I'm covered in puke, poop, pee, vomit, everything. I don't know how I got there. I don't know where I am. My second memory is I come to, and I'm in a bedroom, and I'm in a bed, and I don't know who that is, and I'm checking the empties on the nightstand to see if there's anything left. And then I go to the bathroom, and I'm looking for NyQuil, cough syrup, Listerine, perfume, cologne. Is there anything in there that's got alcohol in it? And then I'm going in the kitchen, and I'm praying they've got the real vanilla extract and not the imitation stuff. The next snapshot I have is it's loud. It's loud. There's all these lights and these loud noises in my back. My back is being scraped, and McFarland Avenue was the busiest avenue in Tuscaloosa, and what I was told was I had laid down in front of oncoming traffic. I wanted to take a nap. So I'm in the middle of the busiest highway in this town, and my friend has me by the ankles, and she's trying to pull me out of the highway, and the noises is all the lights and the cars honking. So the last snapshot I have is we're at a club there, and we're all listening to the band, and we all standing around doing that college dance. And I've got a cigarette in this hand and a Miller Lite Long Neck in this hand, and I proceed to crap all in my pants. And I take a puff, and I take a swig. Rock on. Absolutely pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And I was doing what I had to do to get what I had to get on a daily basis. All my morals were gone. I was not the woman that my mother and my grandparents had raised me to be. I was absolutely just barely surviving. So on May 18th, 1991, there was a knock at my door. Somehow I'd managed to get an apartment. I don't know how. I didn't pay rent. And my mother is there. And she hugs me, and she tells me she loves me and that it's going to be okay. And she said, she said, I don't know what's going on with you. She said, but we can go have lunch, and I'll tell you I love you, and I'll leave, or you can decide to get some help. So she left for a little while. She came back. I said, yes, Mom, I want to get some help. So that day we packed up everything in the apartment. We drove the 4 hours to my hometown. We got about 3 hours sleep. We got up in the middle of the morning, and drove another 4 hours to the very bottom of the state in Mobile, Alabama. So on May 19th, 1991, at 9 a.m., I was on the 10th floor of Providence Hospital in Mobile on their psych unit behind locked doors. I don't remember a lot of that first week. I remember pink elephants and spiders. And then they started sending us to those groups. Now, I will tell you, I was 19 when I entered treatment. I turned 20 while I was in there. And while I was in there, I made the mistake of telling my psychiatrist that I might have drank a little bit. Well, he was a recovering alcoholic. So he started sending me to those meetings. And I didn't want to go to those meetings. All y'all were old and crusty, and you wanted to shake my hand. Now, mind you, this was 30 years ago. There wasn't a lot of young people going to AA back then. Y'all really were old and crusty. Now, y'all probably were my age, but anyway, I would sit in the back of the room, and I would hide. I would hide behind my knees. I would hide behind my hair. I didn't want to shake your hand. I didn't want to hug you. And you know, I kept hearing the differences, you know. Well, I never drank out of a brown paper bag. Well, that was a technicality. I mean, my God, I'm drinking out of empties and whatever else I can find, right? Well, I never slept under a bridge. Good God, I'm in concrete stairwells and I don't even know where all else. I'm in a blackout. How do I know where I've slept? You know, all those differences that were just technicalities. And then one day at the Alano Club in Mobile, a young lady got up at a speaker meeting and she shared her story. And she had kind of grown up like I did. She had drank like I did. She had done the things that I had done. But she was happy and she was sober and she was clean and she was smiling. And her story had depth and weight. And something about her story resonated with me. And I remember thinking, hope. I remember feeling hope for the first time. You know, she did all the stuff like I did and she drank like I did and she's saying that she's an alcoholic. Maybe that's what I am. Maybe I'm an alcoholic. So that day, my ears opened up. And if you're new to AA, please, I encourage you, please listen for the similarities. You know, some of our details may be different, but the feelings are all the same. If I tell you that I had a hole in my soul or that I felt different from the very beginning, you know what I'm talking about when I say that. And so that day, all the differences went away and I started hearing the similarities. When I left treatment, I didn't know where I was going to go. You see, part of my disease was at some point when I would come to and finally get some alcohol in me and I'd still want to feel better, I would want to go shopping. And I love to go shopping. And it never occurred to me that just because there were checks left in that checkbook, there might not be money in that account to back that up. So I had written hot checks all over the place. Well, my mother, when she came and got me that day, had gathered up all the brown official looking documents that were pouring out of my mailbox. Because you see, this alcoholic believes that if I don't look at it and if I don't touch it, it ain't real. So I just would not touch it. It just stayed there for all I care. Well, it was 2 brown paper sacks full of envelopes that said federal government. So when I left, I was in treatment for 60 days, which again is unheard of now. And when I left there, I didn't know where I was going. My mother had gathered up all of that. And the least amount of time I was looking at was 15 years at Julia Tutwiler Prison, which is the women's prison not far from where I live now. So when I left that treatment facility, I get in the parking lot and my mother is there and she's got this long official piece of paper. It's a contract. And she's willing to let me go live with her, but I have to sign this contract. And it's a tit for tat contract all the way down. And at the bottom, it talks about that she went back and paid that $10,000 in hot checks and fees that I had written all over the place, and that I had 10 years to pay that back, or I'd have to finish my time served. And I'm very grateful to say that I was able to pay that off in 8 years. The God of my experience just does wonderful and just creative things. And I was in a car wreck that was the other person's fault. And when the settlement check came through, it was the exact amount to the penny left that I owed my mother. So I go off to live with my mother and I start attending AA outside of treatment. Level Plains Group was my first home group. It's a little bitty caution-like town between Enterprise and Dothan in the bottom right corner of the state. And I remember walking in that clubhouse and I can still see where everybody was sitting. And that night I was given a sponsor and a grand sponsor. My sponsor's name was Gloria. And after that meeting, she told me, she said, Amanda, you never have to take another drink of alcohol ever again if you don't want to. And she told me, she said, look, if you were eat up with cancer and they told you tomorrow down at the CVS, they were going to be giving out little blue pills that would cure your cancer, would you go? And I said, absolutely. I'm going to be first in line. She said, okay, you've got the disease of alcoholism. And this is your little blue pill. Now, this has got a fancy cover, but this is our basic text, Alcoholics Anonymous. She said, you've got to take it every day. And she took me to the doctor's opinion where I learned that I was not just a bad person, that I had a spiritual malady, that I had a physical allergy, and that I had a mental obsession. And I had to find the first step in the book, and I had to identify with the stories in the back. And and all of that. And then we get to the second step. So could I see that my life was unmanageable? Could I see that I was powerless over alcohol? Absolutely. So then we get to step 2. I got to come to believe. Now, I will tell you, when I came to AA, I was angry at God. I didn't want anything to do with God. He had never done anything for me except take people I love away from me. I was done. And Gloria said, well, Amanda, do you believe that I have a God? And I said, well, yes, ma'am. And she said, well, because she wanted me to start praying. And I wasn't keen on that starting praying stuff. She said, well, if you believe that I have a God, would you be willing to pray to my God? I thought about that for a minute. I said, yes, Gloria, I will pray to your God. So that's who I prayed to until we got to the official second step. I prayed to Gloria's God in the morning, and I thanked Gloria's God in the evening. When I was saying this appointed prayer, I'm saying it to Gloria's God. So then we get to the second step, and she breaks out this yellow legal pad, and she has me draw a line down the middle. She said, okay, on this left side, I want you to write down all the qualities of the God that you believe in today. I want you to give him a name, and I want you to list his characteristics. Okay? Zeus, lightning, vengeful, angry, unforgiving, hateful, all those kind of words. She said, okay, now, on this right side, I want you to think about, what would you like for God to be like? What kind of qualities would you like for God to have? I said, okay, Santa Claus. Happy, joyful, kind, loving, generous, sweet, funny, all those kind of words all the way down, right? So she had me get some scissors and cut that paper down the middle. And that left side, she had me tear that up. She said, Amanda, we are going to let go of these old ideas. I had to shred it up, we burned it, and we released it. She said, now, I want you to take this right side piece of paper, and I want you to tape it to your bathroom mirror, and that's the God I want you to start praying to. And that's how I began my journey to finding a God and a concept that I could believe in. And I will tell you, that exercise and the Little Black 24-Hour Day book were the 2 things that helped me the most come to believe in a power that I could believe in. And I will tell you, I still read that Little Black 24-Hour Day book every day. So that was the second step. So then we get to the third step. We did the third step there in the clubhouse, had some writings to do with it. We got on our knees, we said the prayer. And for me, that's not just a one and done step. For me, I still do my third step prayer. You know, there was a time in my sobriety where I felt like I had to save that prayer for only the big stuff. And like I would only get on my knees for just the big stuff. I believe it's probably one of our most underused tools in our arsenal. What I have learned now is that I can use that third step prayer for anything. I can put any person, place, thing, situation, or institution in that prayer. And when I do that, I'm releasing that to the power that I believe in. You know, I love the way Ralph W. from California puts it. He said, that's when we're making a deal with God. We're saying, okay, God, I've done one. I know that I'm powerless over alcohol, that my life is unmanageable. Now I've come to believe in you. I'm making a deal with you, God. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to keep doing steps 4 through 12. And when I get to the end, I'm going to tell other people that you have saved me and how Alcoholics Anonymous has helped me. I'm going to do the deal. It's a deal. But how I use that prayer today is putting anything in it. For example, God, I offer Corona to thee to deal with it and do with it as thy will, changing the pronouns all the way down. My bonus daddy had quadruple bypass open heart surgery right after my real father died. God, I offer Chip to thee to build with him and do with him as thy will. Relieve him of the bondage of self, that he may better do thy will. Take away his difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those that he would help, of thy love, thy power, and thy way of life. My God, I offer my mama to thee. Any person, place, thing, situation, institution. You know, when we had to decide what we were going to do with our kids, if we were going to leave them in public school or put them in private school, God, I offer my children's schooling to thee. Whatever it is, when I put it in that third step prayer, I am surrendering it to the God of my experience. The God of my experience is a gentleman. He doesn't reach down and take anything. I have to offer it up to him. I have to humbly offer it to him. And when I do that, then I can turn my thoughts to others. Okay, now who can I go over here and be of service? How can I be of service over here? release it, and then be of service. If you're in my lineage, or if you're from the same sponsorship family, we all have evidence journals in which we keep how those prayers get answered, how God chooses to show up in those instances. And it's really kind of funny. I'll share you one quick story, one of my favorite stories from one of my sponsees. She had a nemesis at work, and we had not been working together very long. I had just got her, but she had some sobriety. And I said, look, and I was tired of hearing about this woman, and she had done everything that I had asked her to do. I said, well, let's put this woman in the 3rd step prayer. And so that Friday, she starts putting that woman in the 3rd step prayer. I said, now you can't just do it in the morning. Anytime that woman comes near you or the thought of her crosses your mind, you put her in that 3rd step prayer and let's see what happens. That was a Friday. She started praying for that woman on a Friday. Monday morning, I get a phone call. You ain't gonna believe this. I said, tell me. She turned in her resignation. So you see, that's the kind of evidence. That's how fast God can work if we will surrender those things to him, right? So then we get to 4. I didn't mind 4 and 5. I love talking about me. I could talk about me all day long. It's my favorite subject. So I wasn't worried about that. But what was interesting was writing down all the resentments. My first resentment came when I was 5 years old. I'm on the playground and all the kids are talking about what their parents do for a living. And I had to say, well, I don't have a daddy. You see, my mother was a young mother, got married right out of high school, got immediately pregnant, and she had married a biker, drug addict, alcoholic. And when she was 6 months pregnant, and he was abusive. When she was 6 months pregnant with me, he took a shotgun to her and threatened to kill her. And so she called her daddy, my peepaw, to come and rescue her, and he did. Now, 5-year-olds ain't gonna get all that. It was just easier for me to say I don't have a daddy. My second resentment came when I was 8 years old. I got diagnosed with my hearing loss. I have nerve deafness. It's hereditary. My biological father has it. My biological paternal grandmother has it. Didn't know all that. They used to take you in the library. They'd put the headphones on, and you'd have to raise your hand when you heard the beeps. Well, I never heard the beeps. So what that looked like all those years ago was it put me on the special ed list for the rest of my school life. I always had to sit in the very front of the classroom because I'm a lip reader. I read the teacher's lips. I had to go to speech therapy twice a week because I had trouble hearing and pronouncing consonants like W and R. So I felt different from the get-go. And back then they didn't believe in putting hearing aids on children. They thought it would hurt their hearing. My third resentment came also when I was 8 years old. Like I said, my mother was a young mother. Most of my life, she was a single mother. My grandparents helped raise me. Well, she decided that she wanted to go back to college and better herself. Well, she wanted to move 4 hours north in Alabama and go to a college. Well, at this point, I'm an only child. I'm the oldest grandchild, and I'm the oldest great-grandchild. My world did revolve around me. Selfish and self-centered is an understatement. But also, that's where all my family was. All my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. My aunt and uncle lived right across the street. My great-grandparents. My whole world, my safe place was my Meemaw and Peepaw's house. And she's wanting me to leave all that and go with her. And I never knew what it would look like when I would go with her. It was not always pleasant. So I decided to stay in Andalusia with my grandparents. And my mother left for 4 years. Now, I skipped that next 4 years because that's when I was really starting to develop my survival instincts, which my sponsor politely renamed as character defects when we got to this 4th step. Well, now I'm going to skip to 12. I heard a speaker say one time if we could keep children from turning 12 and going to Southern Baptist churches, we'd have a lot fewer alcoholics. And that was certainly true in my case. So I'm already feeling different. There's already things going on in my life, and now I turned 12 and 3 major things happened. The first one was the day I learned to lie. I was a very busy child. I danced 3 or 4 days a week. I was in the school band. I was in the jazz band. I was in every choir at school and at church that you could be in, ensembles, all of that. So a lot of my young life was my grandmother would pick me up, and I would change clothes in the back of the car, and we'd go off to wherever we were going to go. So on this day, our signals got crossed. And we didn't know where each other was. But I knew that it was going to be bad when she found me. Because, see, this was back in the day when you didn't call DHR. There was no 911. There was no Child Protective Services. You got your butt beat. And what that looked like in my house was Meemaw would have you go out and get a switch off the rose bush. Well, if it didn't have enough to it, Meemaw would pick your switch, and God help you if Meemaw had to pick the switch, right? Well, when she finally found me, I got the worst beating of my life that day. She whipped me so hard with that switch, I had blood running down my legs. I called my mother, who was 4 hours away, and told her what happened, and she drove the 4 hours down. And she sat across from that kitchen table with my Meemaw, and she told her, she said, you will never lay another hand on my child as long as you live. Now, I will tell you, Meemaw never laid another hand on me. But there were many days I wish she would have, because withholding love from a child and that kind of silent scorn is so much worse. The second thing that happened that year, I love my peepaw. I love to go fishing with my peepaw. We had our own pond, and we'd get out there and be fishing. And, you know, somehow one day we got to talking about him and Meemaw arguing. Now, I didn't like him and Meemaw argue, and they were my safe place. I had watched Mama argue with the men that she was married to, and I knew what that looked like, and that scared me. And so somehow we're in this discussion about him and Meemaw arguing, and I said, well, Peepaw, why don't you just get a divorce? Mama does it all the time. I didn't think anything about that. I'm 12 years old. So a few months later, I come home, and I could tell something was wrong, and Meemaw had been crying. I'd never seen her cry, and Peepaw had been crying. I'd never seen him cry. And he called me over there to his lap, and he said, Amanda, you remember that day we were talking on the pond about me and Meemaw arguing? And I said, well, yes, sir. And he said, well, do you remember what you said? I said, yes, sir. I said, why don't you get a divorce? And he said, well, we are. Oh, my God, Amanda, why did you say that out loud? It's all my fault. It's all my fault. If I had just not said that out loud, oh, my God, now my safe place is going to be torn apart, and what's going to happen to me? And, oh, my God, why didn't I just keep my mouth shut? Now, the reality of that situation was Peepaw had been having an affair with Meemaw's married best friend, who divorced her husband, married my Peepaw, and they built a house across the pond that my Meemaw could see out her kitchen window the rest of her natural life. Yeah. The third thing that happened when I was 12, I had always wanted to find my real father. My mother had told me when I was 12 years old, if I wanted to, that she would help me find him. I had one picture of Slim. It was them on their wedding day. He was 6'5" and skinny. That's why they called him Slim. One blue eye, one green eye, short military haircut. Them on their wedding day. That's the only picture I had. You know, I'm thinking, you know, maybe he's rich. Maybe he lives somewhere exotic like California and can take me away from all this. Yes, Mama, let's go find my real daddy. So she starts making phone calls, and lo and behold, he's living in his mama's house in Spring Hill, Tennessee. So me and my mama and my favorite aunt, some of y'all know where that is, traipse up to Spring Hill, Tennessee. And I meet my grandma, I meet my grandpa, and we're sitting in the front room, and I hear a sound that I had never heard before. Now, my little town only has 22,000 people in it. And you either went to the Baptist church or the Methodist church. We had maybe 3 Catholics. They were foreigners. They were way on the other end of town. Everybody looked like us, talked like us. There was one middle school, one high school. Everybody's same, right? So I'm sitting in this front room, and I hear a sound that I had never heard before. Very loud. Holly, 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 coming up the driveway. And I look out the window, and there is a woolly booger sitting on a motorcycle. It looked like a woolly booger. Just think of Sasquatch, Bigfoot, sitting on a motorcycle. And so it gets off the motorcycle, and it's got a beard down to its belly button. It's got hair down to its butt. It is covered in tattoos. And this one says F off. I had never even heard that, let alone seen it in ink on somebody's body. And it comes in the house, and it says, well, aren't you going to hug your old man? No. That was the other half of me, and he wasn't taking me nowhere, and I needed a drink. And it was right after that experience that I did have that first conscious drink of alcohol. So while we're in that 4th step, I also write down about the behaviors that I had done while I was drinking, and the manipulation, and got down to the character defects, and she hurt my feelings and called me a hoe. You know, all of that in there, you know. That was really kind of funny when she did that. You know, she's like, Amanda, did you ever let a guy take you out to dinner and buy you drinks all night, and then you gave it up? Well, yes, ma'am. She's like, honey, you was hoeing. You just wasn't getting paid cash in hand. So she called all my survival skills, character defects. We get to the 5th step. I share all of that with her. It was a beautiful experience. It was wonderful. I had my first spiritual experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. When I got done with all of that, and that woman came over and hugged me and told me she loved me, that was some powerful, unconditional love that I had never felt up until that point, not since my great-grandmother had died. And then she said something that just ruined the moment. She said, well, what are you going to do if I get drunk tomorrow? I'm like, Gloria, what are you talking about? She said, well, what are you going to do if I get drunk tomorrow? I'm like, well, I don't know. What do I do? She said, you get another sponsor. And a few years after that, she did go back out and drink, and she stayed out. And a couple of years ago, they found her in her home. She had died an alcoholic death. She had been dead a couple of days before her son found her. So then we get to the 6th step. Now, I will tell you, 6 and 7 is what scared me to death. I was terrified that God was going to reach down and yank me up by my hair and pull my skin off my insides if I let go of all these survival skills. Because you see, they were my survival skills. This is why I was still alive. And I did not know if I was ready to let all of them go. Oh my God, it terrified me. She said, Amanda, it's not going to be like that. She said, look, God's going to probably work on you one at a time, or maybe 2 at a time. He's not going to take all of them at the same time. She said, can you be willing to work on one at a time? And I said, yes, ma'am. And that's exactly what I found to be true. The first thing God had me working on was telling the truth. You know, I would go up to an AA meeting, and I'd be talking to somebody before the meeting, and I would tell a lie. And I'd have to go tell my sponsor, I just told Harley Bill a lie. She's like, well, go over there and tell him the truth. I'd have to go back over there and tell the truth right before the meeting. That was the hardest thing. It was so ingrained in me to just, even when I didn't have to, it just came out. And then the next thing was cash register honesty, thieving, not taking money out of my Mima's purse. And I will share with you, even after all those years, I have discovered the character defects are the same. They're just a little more subtle, and they've got better shoes and better purses. But as I continue to peel the layer of this onion, it's still the selfishness, the self-centeredness, the fear, everything that we learn when we first get sober. Then we get to 8 and 9. I had to make a list of all the people that I had harmed, all the institutions that I had harmed. My mother, my grandmother, had to sit across from them and make amends. I had to take envelopes full of money to places like Waffle Houses because I used to steal their ashtrays, and car dealerships because I used to take the shiny things that they would hang on the antennas because I'm all about some sparkle. I did all of that. And as I got through those 9th step amends, I began to feel different. I began to really believe that there had to be a power out there greater than me, because I could feel it through having these experiences and just trying to trust that. I began to feel different. And then in step 10, like my little sponsor, little Miss Peggy, used to say, you get contacted. And that was true in my case. And I've learned, you know, I have to continue to take this inventory the rest of my sobriety. You know, I used to skip over them words, continued for a lifetime. I will share with you today, I used to get 10 and 11 confused. But now I know that step 10 for me is while I'm awake. Step 10 for me is my awake hours. In those awake hours, am I feeling selfish, fearful, resentful, dishonest? What's going on with me in those awake hours? I do 10 steps with my sponsor. I do 10 steps for women all across the country, trying to see where my character defects are manifesting. If I'm having a conversation with somebody in my head and I'm going, well, then I'm going to say this and they're going to say that, and then I'm going to say this, that's a resentment. If I'm driving down the road and I'm thinking about making a phone call or writing an angry email, that's a resentment. I better get on the phone and be talking to somebody about it. Am I HALT? Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? If I wake up, if I didn't have a good night's sleep, for an example, Saturday night our air went out and we didn't know it. So I wake up pouring sweat at 5 a.m. Well, that Sunday morning we knew the air was out, but we didn't really have a whole lot of options. So Saturday night and Sunday night I did not sleep well. So I told my family Monday, look, you got to let me just get out of here. I am ill and I know it, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Okay, so how is all that manifesting? Because if I wake up and I'm already tired, then my perception is already skewed. For the rest of that day, I'm looking through the I'm tired filter. That's not a good place for me to be. That means my pause button is going to be a little shorter than it normally is. I have to watch out for that. Am I going in the kitchen and eating the whole bag of Oreos? There's something going on with me. If I'm causing our family's budget to be over, am I going shopping and shopping and shopping and shopping? There's something going on with me because I'm trying to fill it with something else. What's going on with me that I'm trying to fill it with the whole bag of Oreos when one will do? So how are those character defects? And I used the 7 deadly sins. How are they manifesting in my life? What does that look like today? And step 11, sought through prayer and meditation. Now, when I first got sober, I really thought you had to cross your legs and do your hands like this and light a candle and go, And I knew I could not do that. I was like, I can't do that. And so Gloria gave me that 24-hour day book. She said, Amanda, today, for this week, just read the little middle part. Can you read the little middle part? And I would say, yes, ma'am. And then one week she might say, okay, can you read the top and the middle part together? Or can you say the middle and the prayer at the bottom? And I'd be like, yes, ma'am. That's how I began to learn how to pray and meditate. For anybody who says they don't know how to meditate, that is an untruth, because every human being on this planet knows how to worry. Worry is negative meditation. I have to learn how to do positive meditation. So then I had a mentor years later, Mr. Diaz from Florida, and I loved him. He said, Amanda, he said, just let the big book fall open. And so I would get my big book and it would just fall open. He said, okay, now just pick you 2 or 3 sentences in here. And so I would pick 2 or 3 sentences. He would say, okay, now just think about that for a few minutes and think about, what does that mean to you? Or what does that look like in your life? Or how could you apply that in your life today? And so my prayer and meditation has evolved. I heard a speaker say one time, seek out the places where you feel the nearness of your Creator. And then when you find those places, go back there often. Some people feel nearness to their Creator in their church. Some people feel nearness in their Creator in a Buddhist temple garden. I feel, well, now I can feel near anywhere, but nature, especially with this COVID outbreak, I can be out in nature, I can be hiking, I can be at the beach. Maybe it's with my relations at a Native American sweat lodge. Find the places where you feel that power that you believe in and go back there often. So I want to be a seeker. I try to continue to be a seeker. Sometimes that's through music. Sometimes that's through different books. Sometimes that's through different spiritual leaders. Whatever it is, I want to be open for whichever way my Creator wants to communicate with me. And then in 12, I had that spiritual awakening. And I did have that spiritual awakening, and I couldn't wait to share with others how Alcoholics Anonymous had saved my life. And I try to practice His principles in all my affairs. And some days it's easier than others. I try to be of service, as much service as I can. This Zoom has been a wonderful way for me to be of service during all of this. I'm not getting a lot of face-to-face times with my sponsees. I'm still talking to them over the phone. We do FaceTime. Some I get to see. We had a group last night in the park, and we all sat like 10 feet apart in a big old circle and had to holler at each other, but we all just needed to see each other, Maybe there's other ways I can be of service. I've gone over here and mowed a neighbor's grass. There's some elder members that we've taken food to. So I'm having to be intentional about how can I be of service in the middle of all of this. So it's a learning curve because none of us have ever been here before. So I will share with you real quick about why I say the God of my experience. It's been a long time since I prayed to that Santa Claus piece of paper on that bathroom. And as the years went on, when my grandmother was dying, who raised me, I realized that I needed for God to come down out of the Milky Way. I had Him up there in the Milky Way. I had Him way up yonder in the stars. And I needed for God to come down. I needed to feel God right here, right now. And I was writing in my journal, and I was doing a lot of walking on the beach, and Spirit began to lead me to different journal writings that I had written about, stories about seashells and how we're all imperfect. And then I was brought back to mind of an experience I had in Sugarloaf, Maine, and with a lady who came up after. And then I was taken to an experience where me and my sponsee were one-on-one, and it was just like all of a sudden there was a bubble around all of us. Everybody else disappeared. And so all of these experiences were coming back from my memory. And I was thinking about, it says in there, as we understand him, God as we understood him. Well, I don't want to understand God. I don't ever want to have God in a box where I can understand him. I need the God of my experience to be bigger than any problem that I am ever going to have. So when all of that came together, what I discovered was those were my experiences where I felt the nearness of my Creator. Those were my experiences where I knew it was a power greater than me doing something. And I don't have to get into a theological discussion with you about my experiences. They're my experiences. You have your own experiences, whatever they are. And so today I don't say God as I understand him, because I don't ever want to limit him. Today I say the God of my experience. There's never enough time to share all the miracles. I've told you that I've been with that same man for over 28 years, been married for over 20. My beautiful children, 18 and 16, have never seen their mother take a drink of alcohol. Even through losing 2 sponsors, one to alcoholism, one in sobriety, and then losing my mentor in sobriety, didn't think about taking a drink. I kept doing the best I could to follow the spiritual program of action that is outlined in our basic text, Alcoholics Anonymous. I will share with you really quick one last story, because I left you hanging about my dad. You know that I wasn't raised with him. I met him when I was 12. We didn't really get to have a relationship through my high school years because he was drunk or high every time I saw him. When I was around 24 years old, God began to lay his name on my heart. And one day I found myself driving up to Tennessee, and he had not been drinking or using that day. And we walked around, and I had a kind of an out-of-body experience, and I realized I was sharing with him what I was like and what happened and what my life is like now. I was crying, Slim was crying, I hugged him, and I left. And a couple of months later, he called my mother. He said, I'm coming to Dothan, and we knew what that meant. We knew that he was coming to get sober. He came to Dothan, he detoxed for a week on my mother's couch, and he went to treatment for 30 days. And when he came out of treatment, I asked him, I said, Slim, why now? Why this time? He 6'5", 280-pound biker in a famous gang, a big bad man. Why now? He had tried to quit before. He had almost died 3 times because they would put him in jail or in prison, and he would get the DTs, and he would almost die. They'd have to take him out, put him in the hospital. He said, Amanda, when you were standing on that hillside sharing your story with me, he said, I could no longer deny who and what I was. So we were blessed with 25 years of my father having a sober life. Last August, he celebrated 25 years sober. So I got to be with him at the end of his life and be the sweet, kind, and loving daughter that I didn't get to be at the beginning. And as the cancer was eating him up, we had days where he realized that there were things that he could no longer do. And I remember the day that I had to tell him, Slim, you can't get on that motorcycle. And I remember the day that I had to tell him, Slim, we can't go to the houseboat. We used to go to the houseboat down on the Alafia River. We would sit on the top. We'd stay all day there, watch the sunset. So, Slim, we can't go anymore, because he couldn't get up the ladder. And as the hospice nurses were coming in, God was still using him. One young nurse came in, and she saw the big books and all our literature on his table, and she started asking him about it. And Slim started sharing with her what he was like, what happened, and what he's like now. Well, she had a boyfriend and had him for years, and he was drinking so much, and it was just terrifying her. And so as a result of that conversation, she found Al-Anon. Another hospice nurse came in one day, and she saw all of our big books and stuff on the table, and she comes in, and Slim gets to share with her what he was like, and what happened, and what he's like now, and how we've had this wonderful 25 years of father and daughter together. And she had 27 years sober. Her clubhouse was right down the road. So even all the way to the end, God was still using him. And one of the last days he could talk, he talked about, this cancer is taking everything I love away from me. He said, but you know what? There's one thing this cancer is not going to take away from me, and I'm going to die sober. And he did. So I will close with this. The last 29 years of my life have been rich and meaningful. I have had my share of problems, heartaches, and disappointments, because that is life. But also I have known a great deal of joy and a peace that is the handmaiden of an inner freedom. I have a wealth of friends, and with my AA friends, an unusual quality of fellowship. For to these people, I am truly related. First, through mutual pain and despair, and later, through mutual objectives and newfound faith and hope. And as the years go by, working together, sharing our experiences with one another, and also sharing a mutual trust, understanding, and love, without strings, without obligation. We acquire relationships that are unique and priceless. There is no more aloneness with that awful ache, so deep in the heart of every alcoholic that nothing before could ever reach it. That ache is gone and never need return again. Now there is a sense of belonging, of being wanted and needed and loved. In return for a bottle and a hangover, we have been given the keys of the kingdom. My name is Amanda Brown. I'm a grateful alcoholic. Thank you for letting me share.